someone near half the time. Here comes another 1,000 years. It's left my mind and all my tears about all those we left behind, and the words we'll never find. All of us are beating, all of us are needing our time. Working for the county, filling up a bounty. We'll feel fine. Ave Maria, Ave Maria, all of us are feeding, all of us are needing our time. Working for the county, clearing up a bounty. I feel fine. All of us are feeding, all of us are needing our time.
All right, well, welcome everyone. Good evening. My name is Jesus Guzman, and thank you all so much for joining us this evening and spending some time with us. We're really excited to have everyone with us. Again, my name is Jesus Guzman. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director here for Generation Housing. Mi nombre es Jesús Guzmán. Soy el Director de Pólizas y Abogacía aquí con Generation Housing. To start, just want to offer a few housekeeping notes. We do have interpretation this evening, and really grateful for Betsy Chavez from the Hannah Boys Center, who is joining us to offer Spanish language interpretation. So again, if you want to access that feature, we encourage you to click on the bottom button of your screen and go ahead and select that option. We'll also have a chance for audience Q&A towards the end of the event. So as you're thinking of questions and things come up, feel free to go ahead and drop those questions in the Q&A function. So we encourage folks to go ahead and add those throughout. And then our moderator for the evening, Luke Lindenbush, who I'll introduce in a moment, will help us with the audience Q&A, as well as moderating the two panels that we're really excited to have this evening. So Generation Housing, just a couple of quick notes about our organization before we jump into our panel discussions. Generation Housing is a nonprofit housing advocacy organization. We started earlier this year, and at the heart of our mission, it's to increase the supply, diversity, and affordability of housing to make sure that everybody who wants to live in Sonoma County has a place to call home. But obviously, there's a lot of challenges to trying to make housing affordable here in Sonoma County for everyone. And in particular, I think tonight we wanted to shine a light on some of the challenges that young people are facing in Sonoma County. So tonight we're really excited. We have two panels. The first one is a panel of young folks, 16 to 25 from across our community, who will be sharing with us some of the experiences, some of the worries, the hopes, and some of the ideas around housing affordability here in Sonoma County. So you'll get a chance to hear from them first in the first half of tonight's event. And then second, we have a panel of community leaders who we'll introduce after our first panel. And they'll really get a chance to share with us some of the insights around what they see in terms of how to engage young people, what it means to have young folks involved in the local process to get more housing in Sonoma County. And so that'll be our second panel, and then we're really excited to be able to bring everybody back together at the end, and again to hopefully go through some of the audience Q&A with both panels combined. And we'll try to get everybody out by 7 o'clock this evening. And again, really thankful for all of you joining us tonight. But first, I do want to offer just a few data points, I think, to kind of help frame and set the conversation for tonight before we we jump into our panel discussion with our group of young folks here. And so I want to just go over the really basic question about why housing is vital to young people, families, and communities. And some of this is going to be really intuitive to a lot of folks, right? A lot of the research that we've seen and that exists and talks about stable housing and what that means and what that leads to for young folks, families, and communities. Again, increased educational achievement and improved health outcomes, housing at the intersection of so many things, and being upstream of so many important issues can really improve people's health, educational achievement, greater family stability, leads to stronger bonds between children and parents, improved access to jobs, as well as resources and amenities. And really at a large, but really, I think, intimate level, having stronger communities and neighborhoods as well. So I want to start there just by setting the conversation at that point. But digging into some of the challenges of what we've heard from young folks here in Sonoma County, there's this survey that was done with the Santa Rosa City Schools earlier this year that asked young people what was one of the biggest top pressing community needs. And affordable housing rose to the very top, right? After the Tubbs fire and so much of the distress that's happened in our community and the trauma that folks have been impacted by, there's a lot of pressing needs, no doubt about it. And yet with everything that young folks are dealing with, affordable housing rose again to the top as one of the most important pressing needs here. And if we sort of shift from K through 12 in high school to looking at early young adults here in this case with community college students, four-year college students, we see as well that there are a really significant number of students that are facing housing insecurity. We see that most acutely felt by two-year community college students, but certainly when we look across the different types of community types of colleges, 2-year, 4-year, housing insecurity really rises to the top there in terms of one of the most pressing basic needs that young adults are dealing with. And then, we're right now in the middle of a pandemic-induced recession, and the economy's been hit really, really hard. But even if we go back to when, admittedly, I was graduated from high school in 2007, the Great Recession left really long-term impact on young people, and we have a lot of really good research that tells us about the long-term scarring that young people have when they enter a labor market, enter an economy that is in a recession, and what the long-term prospects of that look like in terms of lifetime earnings for these young people that are entering the labor market at these times. So both for folks that were entering the labor market during the Great Recession and those that are now entering the labor market post high school, post college, in our current economy, these are going to have really long-term significant impacts. And even just looking at the Great Recession data, we did see that young people 18 to 24, 25 to 29, many of whom housing affordability didn't recover after, right? We saw for other age groups it's starting to either return to levels before the Great Recession or at least start to improve. But for those under 30, really did seem to kind of flatten out there as well in terms of housing affordability. So those long-term impacts are really important. And looking right now, again, we're talking about the economic consequences and what this means for housing, but again, 18 to 24-year-olds experiencing job or income loss is nearly twice that is of older age groups. So again, all of this is going to have really, really dire long-term consequences. So again, why it's so important to make sure that we shine a spotlight on really an age group that is impacted through a lot of this economic tumult in terms of making sure that we're centering these voices as well in these discussions to make sure housing affordability is front of mind. And then lastly, I'll turn it over to Luke, our moderator here in just a moment. But wanted to share this, I thought, really insightful graphic around what just the number of years it takes to purchase a home, to a number of years it takes to save for a down payment to be able to purchase a home, and how out of reach that continues to be for young people that are looking to start a family, that are looking to again lay down some roots in a community. And in California, if we see here from this map, San Francisco, San Jose, LA, San Diego, Sonoma County usually tends to be between San Diego and San Francisco, somewhere between 30 and 40 years, right? Is roughly, if folks are looking at a 20% down payment for a median priced home with a median income, it's really a long road ahead to try to save enough for a down payment there. So we want to be able to share some of these data points again to be able to set the context and be able to ground ourselves in some of the challenges that young people are dealing with. And I'm going to turn it over here to Luke, our moderator, our project and policy coordinator here at Generation Housing, who will help introduce our panelists that we have here tonight and be able to hear a little bit more from the folks that are seeing this on a day-to-day. So Luke, turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jesus, and welcome to everybody joining us tonight. We're really excited for this event and really excited to have two really phenomenal panels ahead tonight. I think this might be the first time we've done a two-panel event in 1 hour, but it should be fun and good through the whole thing. So first off, we're excited to introduce a panel of really phenomenal youth that we have assembled tonight. This is a group of youth that live right here in Sonoma County and range from high school students to young adults, college students, and recent college graduates. So have a bit of a range of the experience that youth understand of housing here in the county right now. So it's my pleasure to introduce Victor Pena, Omar Lopez, Juliet Rosales, Jesus Rosales, Rachel Lonto, and Melissa Gomez, our very own communications coordinator here at Generation Housing. So with that, I know these are really brief introductions, but we're just going to dive right into it. So the first question I'm just going to ask, and if anybody wants to answer it, feel free to raise your hand and just dive on in. So the first is, how has housing impacted you in your life? And how does housing factor into the way that you think about your future in Sonoma County? So anyone want to kick it off?
I'll go.
Great.
Okay, so I felt that, so how was housing impacting me in my life? It was such a big stress on my parents to help me with rent. I knew that when I came from, because I come from the East Bay, and I was living with my family, and I came to Sonoma State for college, and I knew I was going to live in the dorms because that was the only thing I knew for like when I applied to school. But I felt that there was a lack of education when it came to budgeting, and that was really stressful, and I didn't count on my parents to help me at all financially. So that was a big stressor. And I feel like when it comes to thinking about my future in Sonoma County, well, I'm currently not living in Sonoma County due to not being able to pay my rent and COVID also really affecting me. And I don't know, I don't know if I see a future living in Sonoma County anytime soon due to COVID and the situation that happened. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Does anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and add. Definitely. So same as Juliet. I came to Sonoma State. I'm from the Bay Area, and all 3 years since I left the dorms, I've had to look for housing. And I think the big dilemma between me and housing was to look for individuals who were responsible enough to, be able to pay housing, to make a down payment. If they had jobs, we were all college students, working full-time, part-time jobs, and trying to study, trying to make ends meet. So it was just definitely the opportunity to look and get people who I trusted enough to live here, because same thing, the dorms weren't always a for sure thing. And Runner Park's rent, is pretty expensive. I think the most I paid was around $800 to $1,000. So personally for me, I'm like, oh my goodness, I didn't ask my parents for help. I'm a first generation college student. I was even thinking about, even this year as I got like a new employment, like if it wasn't to work out, was I going to refer back to collecting cans again? It's not a bad thing. I loved it, but would I have to collect cans again, going to sell them, Would I have to go back to being a dishwasher if I had to, you know? So it's all of these like factors and variables that played with my housing. And currently I am employed at Verity, you know, I'm very grateful. So it makes ends meet. But for now, I'm just thinking to the future, you know, I do see it kind of tough because of the career opportunities that possibly Sonoma, the county of Sonoma has, not only for me, but for like individuals who are just going to graduate or individuals who are coming to Sonoma State. It's definitely something difficult to look out for jobs with or without experience. And in the end, you just have to worry, where am I going to go? You know, am I going to go home? Or am I going to go to a place where I can call home in general?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Jesus. Would anybody want to add to that? How
I'll
about
go
start with
ahead. I
Omar?
think Victor can go. Going back into my history with housing, my dad actually did own a house. He was able to buy a house a while ago, and we had it up in Mendocino County, but we ultimately had to move here due to a lot of different reasons. And when he sold the house, something that I think was super interesting is that what we made from that house was not enough for a down payment to buy a house here. And so we ended up having to rent. And even realistically, we wouldn't actually be able to afford rent if one of my aunts didn't own the house that I currently rent in. And that's how we've been able to afford it. And going forward, once I graduate, you know, my dad, we've talked, and he can't afford to stay here. And he is planning on moving to Texas, or even possibly back to Mexico. And that's not necessarily where I want to go with my life. And so as I look forward to what I want to do going into the future, I have to look at the fact that I do want to stay in Sonoma County, but I can't afford it. And it's right now with COVID and everything, it's so much harder to try to find like a roommate, or just trying to figure out how I'm going to plan it out. And this is my last year at high school, so I only have a few more months really to start figuring it out. So it is something that has been a big stressor on me, figuring out what college I wanted to go to. And in some cases, it's been more what I focused more on than the actual college itself, is where, if I can afford to live there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Omar. Victor, did you want to add to that? Victor, are you there? I don't think we can hear you. I'm sorry, Victor, we can't hear you. We'll come back to you. Does anybody else want to go in the meantime? Melissa?
Hi, everyone. So similarly to Omar, I've lived in Sonoma County pretty much all my life. And my family and I, housing has always been a struggle. And since I can remember, so we moved here from Mexico when I was 6 years old, and we've lived in the same apartment ever since. And a dream of my parents, and I think everyone else, has been to be homeowners, but specifically in Sonoma County. But sadly, recently they decided that it's just not going to be possible for them. So they're moving out of the county. And kind of same like you, Omar, I'm in between having to find a roommate and an apartment, but even that is already really, really expensive, and also finding a roommate. So I think it affects me in many ways, also having my family far away, which they don't want to leave, and also me having to find housing here.
Certainly. Thank you, Melissa. Victor, do you want to come back to and see if your sound works now?
There we go. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Well, just as everybody else has said, I'm kind of in the same boat as Omar myself. I just graduated high school, so I'm a little bit more, I guess, in my housing journey, sadly. And I have to use the word sadly because, you know, it's a sad story that I grew up here in Sonoma County, specifically here in Santa Rosa. And at the moment, I'm going to school at the SRJC. I'm studying as a political science major. And it's very difficult when I think about the future. I think of right now and what I'm able to afford. I gotta stay with my family. I got to stay with my parents and help out with bills and rent and have to stay here. And when it comes time to thinking about possibly transferring out to a 4-year, you know, the only viable option I see is really staying here with family and going to Sonoma State, because I can't afford going anywhere else if I'm not with family, having to pay with them. And I guess my previous history on housing has been I've always lived with my parents and I've always lived with family, at times multiple families in one household, having to all pitch in to pay rent. And I can't myself recall a moment where I've actually had to have my own room. I guess the privilege and the opportunity of having my own room, I've always had to share with siblings. So that's and it's currently like that. But as I said, when I think about the future and if my possibility of staying here in Sonoma County, it's very sad, but to me, it's very slim to none that I will be able to stay here in my hometown where I was born and raised.
Thank you, Victor. Lastly, Rachel, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I think a lot of them have brought up great points when it comes to college and just figuring out how you're going to pay for housing, college tuition, and just all of that lovely stuff. So for me, I'm going to be graduating in the spring. I'm starting to decide between 4 years and what schools to go to, and it's been a big stress trying to figure out how I'm just going to pay for it all. My family's not going to, they're going to be able to help me out a little bit, but not nearly enough to where I'll be comfortable. So it's, I think, a big stressor for many, high school seniors and people that are going to a variety of JCs, just to figure out how they're going to pay for college and also, and other living expenses and just anything that they have to pay for all on their own for the first time. It's something that is new for a lot of people. And I think that it's going to be difficult, especially post-COVID, to figure out how that's all going to work.
Thank you, Rachel. And thank you everyone for really pinpointing, I think, as what's at the core of what we're doing at Generation Housing and why we do the work we're doing, because there really wasn't a whole lot that just came up that was very uplifting, but I think none of us would disagree that it's very real. And I definitely echo a lot of these experiences, having to move out of the county and out of the state at various points because of the high cost of housing, and feeling like the future of all of the people here really sort of hangs in the balance of that fact. So it's not fun to do so, but thank you all for pinpointing that, because I think it's really important in motivating the work that we do. So with that, I'm going to pivot to our second question, which is, what kind of housing solutions would you like to see taken up in Sonoma County? And I'll just preface that by saying, I think one of the really exciting things about our generation, I'm a little bit older, but our generation nonetheless, is that we have a lot of people who are really thinking big and thinking innovatively in our generation about doing things differently so we can see a different kind of future. So if anyone would like to open up that up, looking forward to hearing from you all. Omar.
I can guess. So I think just looking at some of the more facts of the situation, it's clear that the reason most house prices are so inflated is because there are not enough houses for people. And so the clear solution is build more houses. But the actual dynamics of that become a little bit more complicated. There are situations where if we expand too much vertically or horizontally, we can start looking like a lot of the Bay Area, where all the towns are right next to each other and there's no real differentiation between the two. And a lot of people don't want that for Sonoma County. And so then the other option is to expand vertically and go up, or to build smaller condensed housing. And so I think there's a lot of options with how we do things, but I think the biggest tackle is just building more houses, because that is realistically what is causing a lot of the houses to go up so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Omar. Anyone else?
Yeah, so definitely have to agree with what Omar said. Just piggybacking, houses that could be affordable, designated to individuals in general. I think I was thinking the other day, I'm a Bay Area resident. I could remember that, and I still remember that there's studios, there's 1-bedroom apartments in the Bay Area, really, really cheap, even though people may say it's expensive, but it's cheap. And and most of the times because their work resides around where they're living, and that's why sometimes like it could be affordable for them. But here, when I was looking for myself, because I wanted to be more dependent. I wanted to be figuring things out on my own. And I couldn't just find a 1-bedroom house or a studio just for myself. And at the time, I was employed. Luckily, I've been employed since the pandemic, but still, it was still the case that I couldn't make ends meet. I couldn't, my paycheck, I was living paycheck to paycheck. And just for me, the idea of wanting to get a house that's affordable by design just for me or just for a single individual, it was hard. So I think that's why I kind of more so piggybacked on looking for people that I trusted.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anyone else? Melissa?
So, or whoever.
Victor, want to go for it?
All right. I guess I'm gonna have to echo exactly what the last words that Jesus said, and it was affordable housing and affordable by design, and how he said I feel like we have to have these conversations with these contractors and the people that are actually building these affordable housing units, and make these affordable by design units where it's like either a studio or just a single bedroom apartment for the youth, such as ourselves or anybody else who really are in these means and these times of not being able to afford and stay where they grew up and where they're studying, so that we can keep our locally grown individuals who are looking to innovate, who are looking to benefit through our society. And we want to keep those minds. So I feel like if we are supporting our youth and supporting everybody else by providing affordable by design units, we are able to maintain our locally grown innovators and students and ultimately have a better just community in general.
Absolutely. Thank you, Victor. Melissa, did you want to add to that?
Yes. So pretty much going off what you guys said, yeah, building up is definitely a smart choice since it's helping the housing crisis, building more houses, but also more sustainable. So helping climate change. And also, I think just normalizing the affordability of housing and making this mindset that we have to pay this much for housing in general, going away from that and changing that to let's not spend most of our paycheck on housing. Like, why does it have to be like that?
Certainly. Any last words before we transition to the next panel? Last thoughts from anyone? Rachel?
Yeah, so I think summing up what they all said, we need more affordable housing, building vertically up, but also I didn't even touch upon this, is it being the affordable housing being in more residential areas where, whether it's building near a college so that people can go to college and not have to get a car and all of that, as well as building near, shopping centers, different things like that, so people are able to walk to work and different things like that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, I want to take a minute just to thank you all so much for sharing your experiences with housing, your ideas. It's clear that there's a huge amount of talent in this youth panel, and I hope that we can figure out our housing crisis so everybody here doesn't have to leave and that we all can stay here and continue to thrive. So once again, just thank you all so much for your time and for lending your experience. Of course, would love all of you to come back as we go into the Q&A, and we're going to be doing that after the community leader panel. So definitely feel free to chime in then. With that, I'll also remind everyone watching right now that we are still taking questions. So if you have your questions, feel free to ask them through the Q&A function as we finish up now, wrap up, and go into the community leader panel. So with that, I'll ask Jesus if we can turn over the next panel. Bring the behind the proverbial curtain, as he likes to say. And as they're coming in, I'll just start introducing our leader panel. So this is a handful of community leaders, including our very own Jesus Guzman, Policy and Advocacy Director with Generation Housing, who you already heard from. Jack Tibbetts, who's the first one popping up on the screen here, City Council member in the City of Santa Rosa. Welcome, Jack. Linda Hopkins, Supervisor for District 5 of the County of Sonoma. and Magali Tejas, who is the Community Engagement Director for the City of Santa Rosa. So we'll give everybody just another second to pop on here, but thank you all so much for joining us tonight and talking about a really important issue of youth in housing, and also for being relatively youthful leaders in our community as well, who can provide a source of inspiration for youth who are vital contributors to our community. So the first question I wanted to ask, and anyone can jump in and answer this, just sort of speaks to what we heard from the last panel, which is the labor market and the housing market in Sonoma County can be difficult to navigate for anyone, but especially for young Sonomans still establishing their careers and their savings accounts. So can you please identify some of the contributors to this problem, some prospective solutions, and opportunities for youth to get involved in community engagement? Does anyone want to start?
So I can just, I don't know if I'm gonna kind of throw us off topic or anything, but I really appreciate what the youth had to share. And the first thing that came to my mind, because I noticed we had a lot of, youth of color, a lot of Latino youth, and it definitely, their experiences resonated with my own when I came to Sonoma County to be an SSU student. And I just remember that back then, myself and my my sorority sisters, because I live with my sorority sisters, we struggled to pay $1,200 a month for a 3-bedroom apartment in Rohnert Park. And this was not that long ago. It was in the year 2003. But the other thing that really came to the forefront for me was if our young community members, their parents are having to make these decisions to move away, that's really taking away from their, Latin people, we are interdependent. We have interdependent relationships that help us to be successful. And if you don't have that family unit that attributes to your success, that there's sort of a disbalance that happens and can, have varying outcomes. And it does become sort of the survival of the fittest thing. So I just wanted to share that observation and see if it, resonated with any of you, but that was the first thing that came to my mind, was sort of that cultural dynamic piece.
Yeah, I'll follow up, Magali, what you shared there, and say that I went to the junior college, SRJC. After high school, I graduated from Sonoma Valley High, and then I went to Sonoma State after that. And it took me about 3.5 years, I think, to finish the JC, and about 2.5. So that's 6 years to try to finish my A and BA. But I mean, I paid out of pocket for both. Right, there was a little bit of scholarship money here and there, but in large part I paid for that out of pocket. But I wouldn't have been able to pay for that out of pocket were not for the fact that I was also living with my parents, and we were able to make the rent, all of us together. Right, if I was living out on my own, I had to pay higher rent. That would have been a lot more challenging. Probably would have taken me a lot longer, or there's a good chance that it would have, from going from the JC to Sonoma State, which it took me about a year to make that transition from one to the other. Maybe I didn't go back, right? Like there's just all these costs that sort of you start trying to figure out that on the margins, right? Like this could sort of split one way or another. And for some, it might mean finishing a degree. For others, it might mean having to move out of the county. And those things have, again, really serious long-term consequences. But what resonated with me, Magali, about the part of my family was that piece, right? My family was hugely supportive of, and really the X factor in terms of helping me get across the finish line and get my education. And the thought of not having them here and me living with them to help sort of make that happen is that's I don't know how I would have done it. Like, I don't know how I would have done it. And so that, for me, hearing the stories of young folks talk about that right now, and trying to put myself in those shoes, that I think is a reminder of how important it is that we need to get this figured out to make sure that we are able to keep folks who've grown up here and want to stay here.
If I could jump in, to share my experience, it was interesting and unique in that I was a commuter to college. So I lived at home with my mom and commuted to college to try to save on money. I had student loans, still paying those off. And it's interesting too, how the interaction between student loans and accruing that debt to get an education, to be successful, to buy a house or be able to provide for yourself, can increase your debt to income ratio, which makes it hard to get a loan underwritten on a house someday. And so when I looked at my experience, I was living with mom, I was working for the Sonoma County Economic Development Board. I felt really lucky to get a job there. They actually passed on me originally, and then they had another grant position come through and offered it to me, and I took it in a heartbeat. And I was making about I think it was like $21 an hour, and there was no way I could have rented. So I continued to live with mom, and I lived with my mom until I was about 25. And I actually, fun fact, I don't know if I've ever told anybody this, but when I actually was elected to the city council and sworn in, I was still living with mom. It was kind of an embarrassing thing that I kind of hid from people a little bit. But, long term, I was able to get on my feet thanks to mom, by being able to live with her. And she also helped me with the down payment ultimately once I could sustain it. And that always resonated with me, because one of the things that hasn't happened yet that I really want to see happen during my time in public office is come up, whether it's the county or the city, just some government agency, to come up with a down payment assistance program to help people become homeowners, because the FHA 3% loan that we have right now that are available to first-time home buyers is totally inadequate, in my opinion. It results in a mortgage payment of over $3,500, which just isn't really a good deal for a family. But I can expand on that later. But it was so interesting to me that I was fortunate to have a mom who could help me with the down payment, but I recognize a lot of people out there aren't in that position. So how can we, as policymakers, leaders in government, come up with effective ways to fill that gap?
And if I could jump in, I feel like we're having a moment where we're all recalling, our past housing experiences. And when I was in college, paying my way through a master's program, it was the only way that we could afford to live in the South Bay was to cram 15 probably people into 2 houses that were right next door to one another. And I literally lived in a garage that had been converted to a bedroom. And a couple of my favorite stories from that time was the time that we had some kind of rat or mouse like living in the walls. And for some reason, I thought that it smelled like pee. And I kept blaming my then boyfriend, now husband. I'm like, why does it smell like pee? Like, what's going on here? Is this you? And then we realized that it was coming out of the electrical socket, and it was actually a dead animal in the walls. And so, of course, the way that you solve that is just to put duct tape over the electrical socket. And then when we finally moved out of that place, we were sleeping in a mattress that was on the floor. And when we lifted it up, we realized the whole bottom was just covered in mold because of the humidity. So good times. But and then when we moved back to Sonoma County, it was the same story. It was living with my in-laws because that was the only way that we could afford to come back here, and try to find a way to make things work. I was a journalist and we were farming, and that was just the way that we were able to make ends meet. But what hurts my heart, right, is just from listening to that panel, is that we're losing our future here in Sonoma County. We're losing our future leaders, the folks who really could come and make a difference because they grew up here, they feel committed to the community, they have family here, they have friends here, they went to the schools here, they want to give back. And yet what we're seeing is that we have a total inability to help them stay here, to feel like they actually can claim a piece of Sonoma County. And I feel like that's what needs to change. We need to find a way to keep our future here in Sonoma County, and that's through trying to create more affordability of housing so that other folks don't have to duct tape over the electrical socket in the future.
Luke, I want to sort of come back to what you were asking there about like what can be done and how do we engage young people? Because I think back to the time when I was politicized and got engaged in local politics. And for me, it was my family, right? Like it was the 2006 Sensenbrenner fight around this federal bill that would have made undocumented folks felons, right? And for me and much of my family being undocumented, having come to this country, that for me was what sort of sparked, right? Like getting engaged, because it was a real threat to my family and the people closest to me. And that for me sort of put me down this path of being engaged politically, civically here at all sort of different levels of government, whether it was at City Hall or in Sacramento when we were advocating for things like the Trust Act and other types of legislation. that for me was really important. But the germ of that, I like where it started was with my family, and that really stood out when the prior panel was talking about that. And so what I would say is that when it comes to it sort of, what are some of the changes that we can make and how do we get engaged? I would say hold on to that fire in terms of what drives you, in terms of what, and then try to channel that into getting engaged with the local government here, because that's where so much of housing happens here. And there's often so many boards and commissions, the different places of local government in which there's housing that comes up, and there's often folks that show up to these boards meetings and others, and they're there to say about all the reasons why this housing is going to be a problem and why we don't want that. But there's often not very many people that are showing up and saying why we do need that housing, partially because it's sort of intrinsically built into the nature of the problem, which is that the people that are going to live there are not there to advocate for it, but the people who currently live there have a lot of reasons for why they don't want it there. And I'm a neighbor who wants more neighbors. Like I welcome the idea of having more neighbors in my neighborhood. That's sort of what leads to having a more sort of vibrant neighborhood. Magali knows this, she lives on the street from me. So that means sort of showing up to some of these, like almost some of these boards and commissions and other meetings locally where housing decisions are being made, and often the folks who are most impacted are not the ones there. And so that's what I would encourage folks to sort of get engaged with in the local process.
Yeah, I'm gonna piggyback off of what Jesus is mentioning. And to young people, I mean, you are not in the room, okay? A lot of the times when these big decisions are being made, you're not in the room. A lot of times the room looks very, what's the word I'm looking for? Homogeneous, is that the word? What's the best word to say this?
I would say either homogeneous,
that's a great word,
gray, or an empty room. That's local government.
Well, yeah. And so I think that, because I had the opportunity to get invited to a conversation about housing once, and it looked very much the same. All the people had the same comments, but I feel like I stood out and maybe people heard me because my question was, yeah, when does the translation part come in? Like, is somebody going to come and translate this? And so that kind of took people like, like it kind of rocked people a little bit. But I think if we saw young people taking this opportunity and using those voices, and again, getting, like Jesus was saying, boards and commissions, and learning how to navigate and how to leverage, these resources and being sort of part of the conversation in that way, I think that's one part of it. But I think also as, community engagement, we need to create those spaces and those opportunities to hear those voices. So, I'll definitely add that. I think, Linda, you wanted to add something.
I just wanted to agree with everything that you said. And, the fact is that most of the folks who come to public meetings are the same folks who always come to public meetings. And quite frankly, it's a very privileged class of people because they have the time and the space during the day to attend these meetings. But actually the fact that now public meetings are taking place virtually means that you can actually pop in, and make a quick public comment on a work break, or you can be juggling kids, and trying to do that. And then also have the meeting going on in the background and then take your couple minutes to speak in public. But I will say that I have seen repeatedly all of the elected officials in the room perk up when someone who doesn't usually attend a public meeting attends a public meeting. It sends a shockwave through the system. And I actually would point to the overwhelming success of Measure P. There was a new emergent coalition that formed to support, Measure P in support of law enforcement oversight. And it was really their repeated attendance at Board of Supervisors meetings at the Iolero CAC that eventually got the Board of Supervisors to put it on the ballot. And then ultimately their support that really carried it across the finish line, and it passed with 2/3 majority support, which I think was, beyond a success, even beyond some of the hopes and aspirations of the folks who were supporting the measure. So I think that, there's a fantastic opportunity right now to step in and engage and make change, because there's also an awareness that the current systems aren't working. And the pandemic and our repeated wildfires and disasters in Sonoma County have only demonstrated that more. right? It kind of exposed what we know has always been broken about Sonoma County, but it lifted it up and it threw it in your face in a way that you can no longer ignore it. And so I think that there's an opportunity to create new systems and new visions, and a great opportunity for young people to engage.
The last thing I want to add about youth engagement is to just for the youth to remember that, you know, we're here. I'm here, Linda's here, Magali's here. All these folks that, you know, are still relatively young ourselves, and we were also young once. And speaking for myself, you know, I have a host of interns that, you know, it's not so much an internship as it really is just an exposure to local government. And one thing I always say to all of my interns is, I'd either like your help developing an ordinance or a policy or a program, or tell me something that you want to do, and then I try to push it for them. And I think the latter is even more important, because so many young people have things impacting their lives, and they have a kind of their own idea on how to fix it or make it better. And so as electeds, I think we all, and high-ranking staff, we all have, I think, an obligation to, when a young person comes forward and says, here's a policy that I think we should do, is to actually, you know, give them the time of day and you know, work with them on developing and at least introducing that policy. In government, we all know that some things go somewhere, some things don't, but at least we've exposed young folks to the process.
All right, thank you all very much. With that, I want to move us a little bit into the Q&A, and I'm sure some of these themes will continue popping up. And I'll also ask any of the youth panelists if you want to rejoin. I guess the best course of action would probably just be to message Jesus or raise your hand, and we'll let you answer live as well. So first question is from Stephanie Manieri. With all this said, what would you personally want to see changed within the lines of housing in Sonoma County? Do you believe that there would be that would be achievable with the way things are currently going? And if not, why? Also, what advice would you give to someone younger that is currently thinking about going to a four-year college after high school? Any takers?
I'll jump in. I think, you know, to answer that, I think that's a two-part question. The first being, you know, what do you want to see change with housing in Sonoma County? There's a lot I want to see change with Sonoma County. I'd like to see more funding for it. I'd like to see more diversity in the types of housing that's available that we don't really seem to have yet, although we're making progress with things like the Renewal Enterprise District and kind of revision and review of our planning departments and methods. But I mentioned it earlier, you know, I'm a really big advocate that we help people become homeowners, because I think it's amazing and good to have affordable housing, but most affordable housing is rental housing. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. We need that. But to me, I think there's a little bit more financial empowerment that can occur for somebody when they are a homeowner, because every time they make that check to the bank every month, they're essentially keeping half of that in the form of principal, and the bank keeps the other half in the form of interest. So it's almost like this forced savings account. And it then becomes a financial tool down the road that when you grow up, your kids want to go to college, you can refinance and take cash out, or you can do a home equity line of credit and use money to do the things that you need to do to advance your own family. So I think that we really need to continue to push hard for affordable rental housing, but I think we also need to really push for, you know, significant down payment assistance programs. And Linda was spot on too. I've always been heartbroken to watch my peers that I grew up with move away. Very few people that I went to school with actually live in this town anymore. And one of the big reasons is its affordability of housing. And I would venture to guess that had they had the opportunity to become homeowners in this community, that would have changed pretty significantly for them. So when we want to talk about kind of rooting our next generation in this community, I think that would be a great way to do it.
So if I could just add to, you know, what Jack was saying, I think for many of us that are immigrants, that are first generation, you know, professionals, it's really about how do we build generational wealth, right? And if we can't buy, then we can't build that generational wealth. And for some of our families, you know, we've been renting for 30 plus years. You know, we've been renting, and it's not because we're not working hard. It's not because we don't have multiple jobs. And I think that's a really important factor for us to think about is, you know, how are we creating not just opportunities to be, you know, homeowner, but for entire families to to benefit from building that generational wealth that happens when you become a homeowner. And, you know, I shared once, at an event at Los Cien, how during Kincaid, right? I mean, less than half a mile from where the fire ended. And it wasn't about, you know, me losing my stuff in my house. It was about that symbolism of the generational wealth that I had started, the breaking of the cycle of being the first person in my family in this country to purchase a home. So it means a lot of things, I think, to, you know, a lot of like our immigrant community, our Latino community, that these things that go beyond, you know, like a place to live, right? And I don't know, maybe the young people can help me articulate that better.
Yeah, definitely agree with generational wealth. I am currently about to be 23 years old. My parents have been living here, I'm not good at math, but they've been living here for like, I think since the 90s, I would say. So they migrated from Mexico. Ever since they've been here, all that money, all the hard money that they've worked on, you know, it has gone to rent. And that's because they managed to, thankfully, you know, they managed to take care of, how many siblings? Four children, plus, you know, my father and my mother and like the rest of their family members. So the whole idea behind it is I'm gonna take care of my family without knowing, you know, I want to take care of myself in the end. And, you know, it's sad to say, but recently, I'm happy this is all going on too, because recently my mom and I and my dad, we sat down, we had a conversation. How are we going to buy a house? How are we going to purchase a house? And that's how the conversation starts, you know, create that generational wealth. But I highly believe that it's do a trial run, you know, start with your parents, you know, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm pretty sure that since I'm Hispanic, I'm Latino, you know, I'm very like family rooted. This is how it has to be, because I know that further from my niece who is years old, she's gonna go back and realize, you know what, if I go to college and my family members have a house near there, I'm set. All I just have to worry about is tuition. They don't have to worry about any they don't have to worry about paying for gas. They don't have to worry about paying for food, utilities, whatnot, because it's us building the future after us. You know, this whole time I have a mindset of, you know, I was building my future, but in reality, it's not my future. It's the future for my family, for any kids that will come after me. I'm having everyone benefit off of me, because I've benefited enough of, you know, I went to high school, middle school, I went to like after school centers. I use those benefits, you know, I use those resources. Now it's my time to make sure that I have enough resources to give out.
Great, thank you so much. With that, if anyone has any or Jesus, do you want to go for it?
Just a quick follow-up to the question as well about other types of solutions. You know, I would add that, I mean, I think the type of housing that we have now is the type of housing that, like, for the type of family that we sort of thought about 30, 40 years ago, right? It's sort of that sort of white picket fence, single family detached home in suburbs with, you know, 2 heads of household and 2 children. But the type of family over the decades has really changed, right? Like the type of households have really changed. Younger generations have different types of arrangements, but the housing types haven't changed, right? We still have the same type of housing. So when Jesus and Victor are talking about, what about some studios? What about if we get some duplexes? I think duplexes are cute. I would love to have more duplexes in my community. You know, quadplexes, garden cottage apartments, all these other types of housing types that are more reflective of the type of housing arrangements that people have now, types of households that people have now. Like that really means that we have to start updating our thinking and updating the type of housing to match and really be updated with, I think, the way younger generations are thinking about housing and how they go about arranging their households. And yet 70 to 80% of Sonoma County is single family detached zone, right? The type of housing that we have is built for a generation that really doesn't reflect where we're currently at. And so there's got to be some room, right? And some of that is going to feel like it's slightly inconvenient, right? Like I don't think some of the solutions that we're looking at are going to be slightly uncomfortable, and they're going to be slightly inconvenient. We're going to need to make room for people, right? Like there's going to have to be a little bit of give and take, but it's with the bigger mindset that I want my kids to be able to live here. I have 2 little girls. Like the idea that somehow I I don't want to be able to make room for them or for everybody else's children, right? Like that, there's going to have to be a little bit of give and take to be able to accommodate everybody who wants to be here. That means making some sacrifices, right? To try to think about the future generations and what they need as well in terms of being able to afford to be here.
Thank you, Jesus. And Victor, one last thought and then we'll turn it over.
Yes, very quick. I tried asking a question on the Q&A, but I think once I transfer over, it got erased. My question was for the elected officials, was how as we and Omar Lopez and me myself as high school youth and college youth, how can we get involved on these boards and commissions? How could we actually see our way to those boards and commissions and actually have our voices heard or have our presence, I guess, acknowledged and actually work with these boards and commissions ourselves?
I'll jump in. Well, I think to be on a Santa Rosa board or commission, I believe you do have to be over the age of 18. So unfortunately, that is a bit of a barrier. We do have a program in Santa Rosa where you can shadow the mayor or a council member at council meetings. So I would definitely encourage you to take advantage of that because it really gives you what it's like to do that job from the elected's perspective. And it kind of puts you in the thick of things. So I would encourage you to try that. There was a time when the city of Santa Rosa, and I've always hoped that we would revive it, we actually had basically a student leadership group that was part of our boards and commissions that were getting together, we're generating policy recommendations for the council. And I see Magali nodding. And I think we should probably have a conversation at council about reviving that, especially if there is an interested contingent of young people. And by the looks of this forum, yeah, it looks like there really are. And there's probably some really meaningful contributions, not just a board for the sake of making a board so you can have, resume support, right? But it seems to me like you all genuinely care and want to make those important policy contributions that are going to make us as council members sit back and go, that's an interesting perspective. That's an interesting angle that needs to influence the outcome of this policy.
Yeah, I would just add that the best thing that you can do is ask, because the worst thing that happens is someone says no. But what I found is we actually wound up creating a new youth position for Sonoma Clean Power just because a high school student was really jazzed and wanted to participate in Sonoma Clean Power, and we didn't have a space at that point for folks who were under the age of 18. And so we actually created a space based on that letter of interest, and the whole board was really excited about it and felt like it was a great question and a great opportunity to create a new program. So turn the question back, how can we do a better job in government of connecting with young folks? Because one of the things that I really want to focus on as I shift into the chair of the Board of Supervisors next year is creating better and more open pathways for appointments to those commissions, because it's a great way to kind of, earn your chops in local government and then potentially run for office someday. And so I really feel like we need to open that up more broadly. To be perfectly blunt, a lot of these commissions have tended to skew male, they've tended to skew white, they've tended to skew older. And I would really love to see a diversity of generations, a diversity, when it comes to gender and when it comes to race, and more of a representation that really reflects the unique composition of our community in Sonoma County. So we haven't done a great job. I wish we had someone who's amazing as Magali to lead over at Sonoma County, but we are working on it. And we did also hire an awesome equity officer in Alegria de la Cruz, who will also be providing some guidance in terms of community outreach. But I would love to hear if any of you all say, hey, you know what, you're not on TikTok or whatever the thing is, right? that we should be trying to reach folks through.
So I just wanted to add super quick, one of our colleagues chimed in here that you can also join citizen committees and focus groups for policy efforts. And also, through programs like Latino Service Providers, we're hoping to have youth, participate more. We're working a lot together for the general plan update, and hoping we could do more work with youth in these ways, because it is 100% needed for sure.
Great. Thank you all so much for two really great panels. And we're not, unfortunately, not going to be able to get to all of the questions that were asked, but definitely feel free to email us if you still have outstanding questions at info@generationhousing.org, and we'll be happy to discuss them and hopefully answer them. So with that, I will turn it over to our Executive Director here at Generation Housing, Jen Close, to close us out. So once again, thank you all so much to each and every one of the panelists and everybody who joined us tonight.
Hi, Luke. Hi, everybody. Jen Close here. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Victor, I have another answer for you, and that is that Generation Housing really wants to get young people involved. And so just starting next year, we're going to have a program, Youth Housing Champions program, where you learn about housing, where you learn to advocate for housing, you learn about careers in housing, and you get paid to do it, and maybe even college credit. So stay tuned for that. Thank you so much, young people, for sharing your perspective. The adults need to hear it. They need to hear that this, really generation-long problem of housing shortage is creating a problem that is not just anecdotal, but it's epidemic. It's people who are not just having a hard time affording to live here, but they're going to have to move. And so I appreciate you really putting a fine point on that, because we need to change something or we're going to lose the leaders of our future, as Supervisor Hopkins said. And thank you to our elected leaders, and Magali and Jesus, for talking about how young people can get involved, because you all, electeds want to hear from young people. They do. And more than anything. So you got to show up, you got to ask questions, you got to make your point, please do. And we're going to be here to try to help you do that. So this is really important, and we're going to do more and more at Generation Housing to try to empower young people to make a difference in our housing challenges here. Now, we can't do that, though, without all of you who are watching. We need you to be part of our membership. We need you to be part of us that say, just like Jesus on his sweatshirt says, we are Gen H. We are we love Sonoma County. We want to stay here. We want our family members and our friends and colleagues to be able to stay here. And we need to be, we want to be 1,000 strong in members. So you can go on our website. Maybe someone can put it in the chat. Jesus, if you could, on our website, you go right now to membership and join as a member. And you could do it for as little as $5. And we, of course, need financial support. But more than anything, we just want you to be members. We want you to be active part of Generation Housing. So thank you for being here very much. Please stay tuned for more things like this, more opportunities like this. Young people who are watching, please stay tuned, because we're going to have some opportunities for you to get involved and help move the needle in housing. Thanks, and good night, everybody.
Well, thank you very much once again to everybody for joining us tonight. So we'll have a recording of this up by tomorrow. So if you're interested in watching it, or you know anybody who might have missed it, we will have that up. We also encourage you to visit our social media channels to stay up to date on everything we're doing on local housing and covering on local housing. So thank you so much to everybody who joined us as members since our launch. And anybody who's inclined to become members tonight. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Jesus.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.